the thing about folk song is I kind of clicked this fairly early, and I've not been as steeped in the tradition of
Yeah, yeah.
folk
Tell on,
of the
tell
zone
on.
as
Yes, yes.
you think I have perhaps, but I, it's this idea that actually to be a good folk singer, you don't necessarily need to have a good voice. I mean, you should be able to hold a tune. You need to, because if you can't hold the tune, it's not good. Um, but you don't have to have a beautiful voice to sing a beautiful song because it's actually the telling of the story that
Yeah,
matters. And if you can, and I've, you do hear sometimes people sing, they sing beautifully, they produce their voice beautifully, but it's kind of dead
yeah,
because there's nothing.
yeah,
Either they're not just either there's no emotion at all, or there's just no, they're not conveying the story, so you
yeah.
don't follow what's being said.
Yeah, almost like an instrumental. They might as well be playing it
Yeah,
on a
exactly.
clarinet,
Yeah,
mightn't they? Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah.
So yeah,
Ah,
so that's yeah, that for me it's like, I mean, obviously it's great when somebody both sings,
yeah, of course. Yeah,
produces a lovely sound and tells the story well. That's the ideal. But there's a lot of people who might not, they might have uh, a rough voice or a quite a quiet or weak voice or a shaky voice, or
yeah, yeah,
but
yeah.
they still, you're rapt, you're listening to everything,
Absolutely. Yeah,
and that's
yeah. Pin
because
drop.
I'm stories are what's in it for me. That,
Yeah,
it's that
yeah,
conveying stories, and just the stories of people,
yeah,
of ordinary people, what their lives have
yeah.
been, what they are.
Yeah, and speaking of which, then, I mean, I'm making all these assumptions about
Yeah,
you,
yeah,
like me, having got
yeah.
involved. So,
Mm.
what is the story then? What's the background?
For me,
Yeah,
well, because I would say well, in some ways I've, yeah, I'm not sure where to start, because the thing is, like, I actually only started going to folk clubs or singing in folk clubs when when about 2008,
okay.
7 or 8. That was folk clubs. Now before, and that's when I was a few years after I moved to London,
Right.
and I had, I was like, right, I'm going to do this. But I, thinking about it, I've kind of had a longer tail leading into that, which is most of my life. So I, for instance, when I lived in Glasgow, in yeah, I'll go into here and there, but when I was in Glasgow, I sang with the Eurydice Choir, which is a women's socialist
Yeah,
choir,
yeah, 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 yeah.
and there are for about 7 years, I think, and that was led by a lot of women who are very involved in folk music, including, Gertina McCulloch, who was one of the big names in Scottish traditional singing. So, but at the time I wasn't that aware of it. It was just a choir that was going to, and we sang all kinds of songs, and some of them were trad songs, but I didn't necessarily really know that or what the scene was. But we used to go away for weekends occasionally. We would go to, hire a youth hostel for a weekend and stuff ourselves with food and wine and sing, and or go to the Sheffield Raise Your Banners
Oh,
festival.
yeah, yeah, of course, yeah,
And
yeah,
when so we'd go to all the things that were on with Raise Your Banners, and then we'd be back in the bar of the place we were staying singing. And that was very much in the folk tradition of just going
yeah,
right
yeah,
and it's your turn to sing. So that was there. I kind of, I guess hard songs, understood the how that kind of thing works, and there was that kind of thing going on in other different contexts of my life, before that as well. And I lived in the Highlands for a few years, and you just turn up in a pub and everybody would be playing and singing and so on. But at that point, I wasn't a singer. So I didn't, I was like, I wanted to, I was like, I desperately wanted to, but I just, it's like one of these things, don't know any songs for a start. And it's like, oh no, actually, all you have to do is learn them. but it takes you a while to kind of work that out,
Oh yeah, sure,
you
yeah.
know, and you hear other people saying that kind of thing, you know, oh, I don't know, I love to sing, but I don't know any songs. It's like, well, all you have to do is learn them.
Get that up. Yeah.
So there's all, and then actually in my family, you know, every Christmas we would get together and the family, like maybe 15 of us, and everyone would do a turn,
Okay, yeah, yeah,
you know,
yeah,
and that kind of thing. So although my actual involvement in folk clubs is, well, still, you know, still what, 12, 13 years now, um, my involvement, I guess, in the folk
yeah,
tradition
yeah, yeah.
has been going for a long time before that. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
and
So that's
yeah,
basically, yeah.
yeah. Of course, we didn't mention the greatest theme of all, which is the
Mhm.
sort of left-leaning
Oh yeah,
tradition and the way.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Although I have to tell you this story. So up in Beverley, would you believe it, the local folk club's held in the Conservative Club.
Oh no, that
But
they've got these great,
it is, and
they've got
it's.
these great buildings. It's like Whitby Folk Festival. They've got, you know,
I know,
that the
but it's.
Conservative Club's one of the best
But
venues.
they couldn't be more welcoming. You know, I expected to see the
Yeah,
socialist workers meeting upstairs. You know, it's crazy. You know, it's just crazy. You know,
yeah,
so anyway,
yeah.
but yeah, because that is such a strong common bond. I mean, it's always been a bit of a cliche, if you like, but it's definitely been. I mean, it always was true for me and mine, but it's absolutely true across the board, even in some pretty fat cat kind of areas of the country. It's, you might call it liberal rather than left, but there's definitely a
Mhm.
kind of, you know, which is why, of course, all the kind of, you know, songs about empire and fox hunting and Christ knows what else
Yeah,
become kind of, you know, liberal issues. But no, no,
yeah.
carry on. So
Mhm.
I mean,
Yeah.
obviously that's
Mhm.
it's interesting, isn't it, that you made a distinction in your mind about getting involved in the folk world as if that wasn't what you were involved with before. It's interesting, that, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I suppose folk clubs rather than,
Folk clubs
I,
specifically, yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. I
yeah, because
guess,
that
yeah,
that
and
implies a
also,
joining, doesn't it?
yeah, but it also it's like an actual, I suppose, an understanding of what that scene is. Whereas before, like when I was with Eurydice and people were singing all these songs, they were just, to me they were just songs.
Songs, yeah.
And now I can now, you know, oh, okay, that one was a jazz song, or that was a traditional song, or that was a folk revival song. I can do that now. But then it's just some songs.
So what was, I
Uh,
mean, so the interesting there then,
yeah,
isn't it, that having made no distinction other than the
mm,
left thing, you know, and the
yeah,
collective
yeah,
thing and the family
yeah.
thing,
Mm.
were you sort of drawn into the folk club world because, well, at that time certainly, and even now, it'd be difficult to go anywhere else and hear anything that was reflecting that eclectic mix of music, wouldn't you? You couldn't really turn up at Ronnie Scott's and expect to hear, you know,
No, no,
Bread and
actually,
Roses, could you? I mean, no, no.
no, no. Yeah, I mean, I suppose I think when I was like moved to London, and I was in Raised Voices choir for about a year, and I actually started getting some vocal problems.
Oh, right, okay.
Um, which so I hmm, had a couple of years maybe not singing at all,
Mm.
and I ended up actually seeing a voice therapist who kind
Oh,
of
okay.
sorted
Right.
me out. I still,
Right.
you know, still they recur to a small extent, but uh, I won't go into that because it's just personal nonsense. But
Fine.
anyway, to do, you know, to do with kind of my relationship with my voice and all that kind of
Right.
stuff. But anyway, that local therapist sorted me out, and I was like, I want to sing. I really want to sing, and I want to sing, uh, not just in 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 a choir or something.
Mm.
I want to be a singer kind of thing.
Mm.
And I was like, well, what kind of music do I want to sing?
Mm.
And it was the only kind of traditional music was what I wanted to do. And I suppose it's partly just like um what that having had that kind of strand through my life. it just was the obvious that, that was what singing was to me
Yeah,
in a
is
sense.
that what I mean? Is that what you'd been buying? Had you been kind of Does your kind of
I
LPCD collection consist of you know?
Probably not at that time
Oh, okay,
particularly.
yeah, 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 yeah.
I
Interesting.
think it was just like, actually seeing like, okay, who do I know who sings? And it was all, it was like the women from Eurydice and
Yeah, 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 yeah,
the people that I knew when I lived in the Highlands and that kind of thing. And that
yeah,
was the
yeah.
music that they did.
And of course
And it's also
Sheffield,
like,
yeah,
yeah,
Sheffield
and
being
yeah,
the
yeah,
self-professed folk capital of the
yeah,
UK at the
yeah.
moment. That probably rubbed off anyway, didn't it? By the time you were
Yeah,
raising the
and
band.
it's like, well, yeah, what kind of I don't know. Somebody said to me once, and this was ridiculous. It's like, well, why are you doing folk? It's so middle class. Why don't you do which is also, like that's an interesting thing because actually in folk clubs rather than a traditional folk, sorry, professional
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
folk music it isn't particularly middle class, I wouldn't say, or there's a mix anyway. But uh, but why are you doing folk? It's so middle class. Why don't you do grime or rap? And I was a bit like, well, but that's not me. That would be ridiculous. I mean, yeah, yeah. So, I mean, I suppose the answer is really that it is my tradition, even
Yeah,
though it was my tradition at the time.
yeah, yeah, but you suddenly find yourself, yeah, yeah, yeah. When you
Yeah, yeah,
explore possible routes, it becomes something
yeah,
that, yeah, yeah, interesting.
yeah,
So
yeah.
what was your sort of early experience of getting into clubs then? I mean, how did they feel? Welcoming? Kind of what was that?
Um,
Weird,
ooh,
rule
yeah,
laden.
yeah. I mean, I suppose that I mean, I must have been to. I've been to the Star Club once or twice in Glasgow and that kind of thing. But when I started, like, I am now going to
Yeah,
folk clubs.
yeah.
Where did I go? I went to the Cellar upstairs. I went to Islington. I went to Sharps. In fact, they're the clubs that I still go to.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
and the Goose is out a bit as well. But
Yes, great.
that's
I love that. It's great, isn't it?
south of the river in London.
Yes, yes.
The effort involved in getting there is a bit much.
Yeah.
Um, and we thought, did I find them welcoming? Um, yeah, ish, but not. They're kind of it's odd because there's actually very little time to really interact with people, which you can go for quite a long time without having much of a conversation at all.
It's very
Especially
true.
when if especially if you have to leave early, or leave if you have to leave as soon as it finishes rather
Yeah,
than
yeah.
hang around. So yes, I would say I found them welcoming, but um, there's limits to how welcoming they can be um in that context. But yeah, I mean they're friendly enough. Um,
Yeah, yes, it's interesting, isn't it? And
yeah.
because you like lots of others have made it your own.
Mm,
It's quite interesting. I remember when we went in the studio, and you said it's the first time you've been in a
mm,
studio at that point, wasn't it? And
yeah.
it's sort of interesting how consciously or unconsciously you sort of build up a set of confidences and
Mm,
experiences that have led
yeah.
to currently you sort of chairing or
Mm.
hosting a session. So what was that story about then? How did you go from just being a punter to thinking you wanted to take responsibility?
Oh, yeah. Well, to be perfectly honest, I kind of joined the Islington Folk Club committee a few years ago, but really just as a kind of I'll help you find some acts
Yeah,
occasionally,
right.
So I was largely resisting taking responsibility, really. Um, but actually, it's actually with lockdown.
Oh,
where
okay, right. Yeah,
uh,
yeah.
because I wasn't, and in fact, strangely enough, I had not been to Sharps for much for quite a few years. So when I started going, I was like I was going to Sharps every, or more or less every week. I did make friends there. You know, did I formed a band for a while, and that kind of thing. But as far as responsibility went, no. And then I was tailing off with Sharps quite a bit, partly because where I was working, it was like, oh, the effort involved in getting there and so all that. Um, and I then, so I probably had, when lockdown happened, I hadn't been to Sharps for at least 6 months, maybe
Okay,
longer, maybe
right.
a year.
Yeah.
I was
Oh,
going once or twice a year, but it was like home, as I always say that as my home folk club
okay.
more than any other,
Yeah.
and I'm very fond of the people there, and it was just like there's this horrendous virus, this and situation, and everybody, it's all just stopped. And I was just thinking, like, so everybody on a Tuesday night, and to a large extent, quite a lot of elderly people
Yeah,
on a Tuesday night who are
sure.
vulnerable and
Yeah.
are not able to get out much anyway, and it was just couldn't bear the thought that 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 would be it, maybe for some of them. It was just awful. And I coincidentally, very early on in lockdown, went to some Zoom meeting about a total, nothing to do with photos, some other thing. And I was like, wow, what is
Yeah.
this thing?
Yeah.
And then I was
Yeah.
like, we could do this for,
Yeah.
for Sharp.
Yeah.
Um, so I was like, well, I was like, okay, can that work? And I was just like, yeah, I'm going to make this happen.
Oh,
And
yeah.
actually, I had been more involved with Islington up to that point. And so I first offered it, I was saying to Islington how about it, and they were not even lukewarm because they didn't know what it was. Do you know what I mean? It was like, and then I was like, okay, Islington aren't into it. I'm not going to make the same mistake with Sharps. I'm just going to set up a session and say, click this
Ah,
link.
right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Good. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so then, I think about well, we know because of the index, about 16 people uh, had turned up to the first session, and I recorded it, and then I sent to the Sharps committee and said, I can do this every week if you like. And they were like, yeah, go for it. So that's how.
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
have a feeling when life's back to normal, I'm going to end up taking more responsibility than I have in the past. you know.
The reason I said you're the best session is that you've proven it. That if you ask someone what they want to sing, like, even if it's the sharp session, they'll sing what they want to sing.
Yeah,
That's it.
yeah,
Like
yeah, 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 yeah.
happily, lots of people will sing things that we would, totally say it's from the tradition. But people would feel because you welcome them, and
Mm,
that's one of the other keys, the role of
yeah, yeah,
hospitality
mm,
rather than
yeah,
arsiness in sessions. But
yeah.
because you welcome them, they sing what they want to sing. So I did a quick survey of, I think we got up to about 900 entries on your thing, and over
Oh my
half,
God. Right.
over half the songs were either
Yeah.
a combination of self-penned or
There's a lot.
from
Yeah.
traditions, post 1950, and an awful lot were absolutely rooted in what
Yeah.
anyone would recognise
Yeah.
as a a tradition.
Mm,
So one of the big themes and the reasons we started this out in the first place was what kind of emotional gap does going to sessions and sing arounds kind of fill
mm,
for people,
yeah.
that going to a concert kind of doesn't. And of course
Mm,
the thing about Zoom is that people have been almost like desperate, haven't they, to find something and a way of connecting.
yeah.
And certainly in many ways it would appear that people are going to continue using Zoom sessions. I mean, how are you guys going to do that, do you think?
We've not talked about it for quite a while. And several months ago, people were kind of asking, or are we is this going to carry on after when we're back to normal? I think that they were asking then because they thought normality would be resuming fairly shortly, and now people are talking about it. But I I would like to keep it going somehow, um, but not. It wouldn't replace, obviously, it wouldn't
Mm.
replace a regular club, and I don't know how you would do it and integrate it with the regular club. I'm not sure if that would be satisfactory, even if you
Mm.
had the tech. But I would like, I think, to do maybe a monthly session because we
Mm.
got lots of people, in other countries.
That's
You know,
right. Yeah. I
people
mean, yeah.
joining from
Yeah.
France and Ireland
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
America and Canada.
Mm.
And, we've made those contacts. So it would be nice to keep it going.